Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to unpack what has got to be the most cinematic and, frankly, bizarre espionage heist of the entire Second World War. It's a high-stakes story packed with meticulous planning, wild deception, and a completely macabre plot that feels like it was ripped straight out of a spy novel. And, as we're going to see, that isn't actually too far from the truth. Let's jump right into this mystery with a question that honestly sounds impossible. How in the world did a deceased, homeless man who tragically died from eating rat poison become one of the absolute most important Allied officers of World War II? Seriously, it's a shocking premise, but the answer to this reveals a top-secret operation that literally changed the course of history, saved thousands of lives, and really paved the way for the liberation of Europe.
Let's start with Section 1, the background, setting the stage in 1943.
So to really wrap our heads around this unbelievable scheme, we have to look at the massive strategic nightmare the Allies were facing back then. After winning in North Africa, they desperately needed to invade Europe's soft underbelly. Sicily was the painfully obvious target. I mean, it's the perfect stepping stone right into mainland Italy. But a direct assault on a heavily fortified Sicily, that would be an absolute bloodbath. On the flip side, Adolf Hitler was incredibly paranoid about an Allied invasion hitting Greece and the Balkans. Why? Because that region was supplying the vital raw materials, like copper and oil, that were literally fueling his war machine. So the Allies knew they had to hit Sicily, but they needed a way to convince Hitler that his worst fears were actually coming true over in the Balkans. The biggest issue here was just how obvious Sicily really was. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill hit the nail on the head when he said, "Everyone but a bloody fool would know that it's Sicily." You see, the massive buildup of Allied ships and troops in the Mediterranean was completely impossible to hide. They desperately needed a massive deception campaign to redirect the German army's attention. That campaign was called Operation Barclay. And the crown jewel of that whole operation? That would be Operation Mincemeat.
Moving right along to Section 2, the plan, building a legend.
The sheer creativity coming out of British intelligence for this is just astounding. The whole concept was heavily pushed by Charles Cholmondeley of MI5 and Ewan Montague of Naval Intelligence. But get this, the seed for this wild deception actually came from a 1939 document known as the Trout Memo, which basically compared wartime deception to fly fishing. And here's a crazy fun fact for you. That memo was written by a young naval intelligence assistant named Ian Fleming. Yes, the exact same Ian Fleming who would go on to create James Bond. Now, to make this fly fishing trick actually work, they couldn't just drop a fake map on a beach somewhere. No, they needed a believable messenger. So, British intelligence acquired a corpse and set out to build what spies call a legend. A legend relies heavily on pocket litter. You know, all those random, everyday items that prove a person is exactly who they say they are. Cholmondeley and Montague completely transformed this unknown body into a fictitious officer, Captain Acting Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. They built him an entire life from scratch, complete with personality flaws, bad debts, and a whole romantic history. The crucial takeaway here is their absolute obsessive attention to detail. Just look at the pocket litter they gave Major Martin. He didn't just have a pristine ID card. The intelligence guys actually spent weeks rubbing that card on their trousers to make it look worn and used. He carried a photograph of his fictional fiancée, Pam, who was actually played by an MI5 clerk. He had these deeply heartfelt love letters in his pocket. He even carried a receipt for a really expensive diamond engagement ring. And, this is brilliant, a demanding overdraft notice from Lloyd's Bank for nearly £80. They even stuffed recent London theater ticket stubs into his pockets just to establish a realistic timeline of his movements before he, quote-unquote, died. They were doing everything in their power to make the Germans believe Major Martin was a real, living, breathing, flawed human being. But, all of that brilliant pocket litter was really just the window dressing. The ultimate bait was what he was carrying. A briefcase containing a personal, heavily classified, but highly unofficial letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander. It was written super casually, but it very clearly indicated that the Allies were planning massive military assaults on Greece and Sardinia. It even went out of its way to specifically note that Sicily was merely a cover target. To make sure this totally priceless briefcase wasn't lost at sea or just ignored by a random pathologist, they took a leather-covered courier's chain, attached it to the briefcase handle, and looped it securely around the belt of the corpse's trench coat. Now, the British needed a completely foolproof way to know if their trap had actually been sprung. Think about it. If the Spanish authorities just found the body and returned the briefcase without anyone ever reading the documents inside, the entire mission was a bust. So they came up with an incredibly clever solution. They placed a single, loose black eyelash inside the sealed envelope containing the fake invasion plans. If the letter was returned to them and that eyelash was missing, they would know with absolute 100% certainty that the enemy had tampered with the envelope. Which brings us right to our third section, the execution, releasing the corpse. Planning the perfect deception on paper is one thing, but successfully pulling it off in the real world, that's entirely different. By mid-April, the clock was seriously ticking because, well, the corpse was naturally beginning to deteriorate. On April 17th, the body was fully dressed, equipped with a chained briefcase, and carefully packed into a specialized steel canister. To preserve the body without actually freezing it solid, they packed it with 21 pounds of dry ice. That ice sublimated into carbon dioxide, driving out all the oxygen to stop the decay. The submarine HMS Seraph then loaded the canister and set sail for the Mediterranean. In the pitch black, early hours of April 30th, they surfaced off the Spanish coast, read a quick psalm over the body, and gently slipped Major Martin into the sea, letting the wash from the submarine push him right toward the shore.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth did they choose Huelva, Spain for this? After all, Spain was technically neutral during the war. Well, British intelligence knew for a fact that the Spanish government was highly cooperative with the Abwehr, that's the German military intelligence. Huelva in particular was heavily monitored by a very active, highly efficient German agent named Adolf Klaus. On top of that, the British hydrographer of the Navy ran the numbers and confirmed the tides right there would perfectly push a floating object directly onto the local beach. It wasn't a random drop at all. It was a highly calculated delivery straight into an enemy intelligence funnel. Section 4. Hook, line, and sinker. The enemy takes the bait.
Sure enough, the body was discovered by a local fisherman around 9:30 in the morning on April 30th. And that's when the agonizing wait began for British intelligence. The Spanish Navy immediately took custody of the briefcase, and almost instantly, a senior German Abwehr agent started desperately pressuring the Spanish authorities to let him see what was inside. The Spanish eventually caved, but they went to elaborate lengths to extract the information secretly so the British wouldn't know. They took the damp letters and tightly wound them around a thin, cylindrical probe to pull them out of the envelopes without breaking the wax seals. They carefully dried them, photographed every single page for the Germans, soaked them back in salt water to make them look untouched, and shoved them back in. But here's the thing. They made a crucial mistake. When the British finally got those envelopes back and forensically analyzed them, they found the paper fibers were damaged from being rolled up. And, much more importantly, that single black eyelash was gone. So the British knew for a fact the letters had been read. But the real question was, did the Germans actually believe them? The answer finally came through Ultra, which was the top-secret signals intelligence operation out of Bletchley Park. They intercepted classified German communications, confirming that the enemy was suddenly shifting their focus to the Balkans. This incredible realization led to a triumphant, climactic message being sent straight to Winston Churchill. It read, "Mincemeat swallowed rod, line and sinker, by the right people, and from the best information, they look like acting on it." Moving to Section 5, the impact, Hitler's fatal mistake. The con had completely worked, but the true measure of Operation Mincemeat's success was the massive, almost unbelievable military consequences it triggered. Hitler completely swallowed the bait, and he altered his troop deployments on a massive theater-wide scale. He ordered the German troop strength in Sardinia to be doubled to 10,000 men. He moved 7 full divisions all the way to Greece and posted 10 divisions to the Balkans. He even went as far as transferring the elite 1st Panzer Division all the way from France down to Salonika, Greece. He completely stripped the defenses of his actual vulnerability, Sicily, leaving it drastically exposed. And that directly leads us to this incredibly powerful number, 38. That is the total number of days the Allied campaign in Sicily actually took. Before the invasion, Allied military planners predicted this fight would take 90 grueling days. They fully expected over 10,000 casualties in the first week alone. Instead, thanks in huge part to the massive confusion and the diverted German forces caused by Mincemeat, Sicily was liberated in just 38 days, resulting in only a fraction of those expected casualties. It was a monumental strategic victory. And finally, our last section, Secrets and Legacy. The man who never was. For years after the war, the true details of this operation were heavily shrouded in secrecy. But the most profound secret of all was the actual identity of the man himself. Dropping the cinematic spy thriller facade for just a second, we really have to acknowledge the real human being at the center of this incredible story. The true identity of the fake Major William Martin was a man named Glyndwr Michael. He was a homeless Welshman struggling at the absolute margins of society who had died a lonely, very painful death in a London warehouse from ingesting rat poison. Intelligence officer Ewan Montague once somewhat dismissively referred to him as a ne'er-do-well, but the profound reality is that this totally forgotten man became the physical vessel for arguably the most pivotal deception of the 20th century. Operation Mincemeat left a vast, enduring historical footprint. Obviously, it heavily inspired James Bond creator Ian Fleming. It spurred best-selling books like The Man Who Never Was, which then became a blockbuster movie. And it fundamentally changed how modern intelligence agencies view strategic deception. But perhaps the most fitting and touching piece of this entire legacy happened much, much later. For decades, Glyndwr Michael's body lay in a Spanish cemetery under the fake name of William Martin. Finally, in 1997, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission added a new inscription to the tombstone, officially recognizing Glyndwr Michael's real name and his completely unparalleled contribution to the war effort. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to ponder today. Without the completely unwitting sacrifice of one forgotten, destitute man, how many thousands of Allied soldiers would never have made it home from the beaches of Sicily? It is a stark, powerful reminder that the immense, crushing weight of global history can sometimes rest on a single, bizarre deception, and on a man who never even knew the part he played. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing and keep asking questions.